This video is going to be a tutorial on how to create a layered pear painting. We will focus on building up a painting using layers, using expressive brushstrokes, and working to capture light using highlights and shadows. To create this painting, I used 3 different colors of acrylic paint that are close together on the color wheel. I also used some black and white, some acrylic matte medium, and then several different types of brushes. So using the image that I've already painted on the right as a reference, I'm going to start with a medium tone of color, and I'm going to go ahead and just really loosely draw out my shape. Now, to give myself a pear, I'm going to draw out sort of a lumpy circle with a triangle on top. I also want to make sure and include the table lines about halfway up from my pear. Once I have my shapes drawn out, I'm going to go ahead and add a medium ground of paint to my entire surface. Now, I used the middle value of my paints that I showed you earlier. I mixed that with a little bit of white and a little bit of medium to get this value. I'm not worrying about using expressive brush strokes for this part. I'm just going through and adding a ground of color. I'm going to color the pear, and then in a second here, you'll see me color the background. Now, looking at the example on the right, you can notice that I have some darker values for my background on the left and some lighter values on the right. So I do a little more mixing on my palette to shake up the colors to get myself a ground. The next thing you'll see me do here is mix up the darkest value of purple that I have, maybe with a little black, to create the cast shadow. Now, this cast shadow in my example is going off to the right, and it needs to go slightly underneath the pear to anchor it to the pear. And now comes the fun part. Here you can see me starting with my highlights. I mixed up a light value of a pinkish color. I'm going over and identifying where my highlighted spaces need to be. Again, I'm using my example off to the right. I'm basing it off of that. And you can see me just going one color at a time. As I'm applying my brush strokes, I'm making sure to brush my colors on really expressively. I'm almost using a dabbing motion with my colors. And you saw me there go from light to medium to dark. I used mostly the same color, just mixed up a couple of different values. And because I want this to be an analogous color scheme, so a few colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, I'm going to continue to go and experiment with color. I'm going to be using my purple, my reddish purple, and then my pinkish color to continue to build up layers. As you see me continue to build up my colors, you're going to notice that I'm keeping the shadows to the right-hand side of my pear. They're wrapping around a little bit to the left to mimic the curvature of the pear. And my highlights are staying on the left. Now, in the middle is a space where my colors are going to be overlapping. It's important that as I'm adding my different values and different colors on top of one another, that I'm not allowing my piece to become stripy. A really common mistake that I see some students make is they think, okay, I need a light, a medium, and a dark. So they have a really light stripe on the left, a really light a medium stripe along the middle, and a really dark stripe along the right. And that just does not give us a realistic looking pear. So it's important that you're overlapping your colors as you're painting. Now here you can see I'm going through with some final touches of white. I mixed, that's actually a really, really light value of pink there that I went through on the areas that need a highlight. I'm going to go through now and do the same thing with my darkest area of shadow. So I want to make sure that I'm able to create a really dark pop of shadow underneath and maybe in the most recessed areas of this pear. The more of a stark difference you have between your lightest value and your darkest value, the more depth you are going to create. So that contrast that you create between your lights and the darks is going to give the illusion of depth and make your pear appear to be three-dimensional. Now the nice way about painting like this is when you're using acrylics, for the most part, acrylics will cover each other up. So if you paint something down and you don't like it, if you can catch it while your paint is still wet, you can blend another color into it, or you can simply just let it dry, mix up some more color, and paint over the top. Remember, through this entire process, our goal is to keep our brush strokes visible. I have a really hard time with that. My natural inclination is to smooth and blend everything, so I have to force my hand to dab with my brush so that I have this expressive use of color. So here you can see my painting close up. What you can really see from this angle is how I layered my colors together and how I allowed my brush strokes, for the most part, to show through. Now, if you're able to keep the highlights and shadows in the correct spot and use your colors expressively, you're gonna end up with something really successful. It may not look identical to mine. I could do the same exercise 20 different times with different color combinations, and each time they'll turn out differently, and that's what's great about it. So I hope this helped, and happy creating.